Well, I'm very sad that we are ending our series on happiness. It's been a lot of fun energy to work with, and we had interesting topics and sound effects. We got to do sound effects. We still have half a bag of popcorn left from the original giant monstrosity of a bag of popcorn. There's still some, and I'm still eating on it. It's not awful. You can tell it's different, but I mean, it's got that feel. It's got that whatever. And with that, we're going to be ending our Compound Happiness series this week. And then we'll be moving on from the 8th son of Jacob and the 8th month. And this year is going to start to draw to a close. Asher, the one that we're on right now, his name means happy or blessed. He's the last son to be born of the handmaids. So we've had all the kids that Zilpah's going to have. We've had all the kids that Bilhah's going to have. All that's left are going to be the original 2 sister wives for the remaining 4 sons, Leah and Rachel. And here's what we have left, just so you can see the final countdown. Here's the final 4. We have Issachar. We have Zebulun. We have Joseph. And we have Benjamin. Some of those names are familiar, right? Some maybe you've heard it, but you don't know much about them. Couple big names in there. Lots of exciting content still to come here at Lifestream Christian Church, so stay tuned. But some of you who are calendar experts are already just waiting for me to stop talking so you can stand up and be like, well, excuse me, this is not the final week in August, so clearly it can't be the final week of Happy and Asher. Well, you can sit back down. You are correct. But next week is the 5th Sunday. And the last time we had a 5th Sunday, I introduced the idea of a bottle sermon, and we are going to do it again. So next Sunday will be another bottle sermon. It's a chance for me to go off script, which I love to do. I can dabble in some slightly nonsensical things, but for sure non-series things. And for this month in particular, we're going to use this bottle sermon to kind of segue into that final countdown and into the things that are kind of falling together and things that have worked out and all that. We have had a lot of fun and a lot of connectivity with our trivia nights. Yes, those of you who've been to trivia night, you enjoyed it. You've had exciting times here at trivia nights. Well, I love doing them, and I want to keep doing them, but I would love to try something else as well. I want to take this same idea, this gathering, and launch it into a slightly different opportunity. In the month of September, the son will be Issachar. That's the next one in line, will be Issachar. And Issachar's name, which we're going to learn in 2 weeks, kind of has some roundaboutness to it where you can say his name has stuff to do with solving puzzles and receiving rewards from solving those puzzles. So I want to take that idea, and instead of trying to do a trivia night in September, I want to try to do a puzzle-style team game in September, sort of like an escape room, but without all the running around, like something you can still do at a table the same way the teams are at the tables for trivia. To have a escape room-ish kind of a thing, team puzzle solving as a competition. And then that will help launch us into September and the things that are going to happen in September and the theme and the series for September. And then last year in October, you remember we didn't do trick or treat last year. We did a soup and chili trivia night where we came here, we brought different soups, we had trivia, and we ate. Remember that? Let's try the same thing, and if all goes well in September, it's a soup and chili with team puzzle style competition together. And then, just because, why not, and it's fun, we've created this theme of doing the Thanksgiving dinners where we come together as a congregational family. We have our Thanksgiving dinner together. We enjoy all those things. Well, let's throw some board games in there too. Let's do table-style board games. Let's eat our turkey and then enjoy some pie with Monopoly. You on board with that? Does that sound like a fun thing? We got one back there. Love it. Me and Scott will be here. Maybe not the two of us playing Monopoly, because Monopoly one-on-one is not really fun. We can play Boggle if you're up into Boggle. I'm all for Boggle, so throwing that out there. We're kind of launching into puzzles and solving team things like that. So if you like that, I want to push toward that. Next week, however, will be the bottle sermon, and it will test the waters of your receptiveness to puzzle solving. meaning I'm giving you a hint now that there's going to be puzzles involved in next week, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Let's get back to compound happiness, shall we? One more week. We've done a lot with being happy, being blessed, but we haven't touched the Beatitudes yet. It's been 4 weeks, and we haven't talked about the Beatitudes. Well, today's the day. The Beatitudes are one of those sections of Scripture that everyone is familiar with, right? Everybody knows what the Beatitudes are. Matthew chapter 5, Jesus sits down, kind of withdraws from the big crowd that's wanting the simple things from him. He pulls himself onto a hillside. He gathers with his disciples. He sits down, and he starts listing off different qualities of people who are blessed, and they would receive different blessings from certain qualities that they have. And we know them. We've heard them 100 times. We've memorized them. We've heard sermons about them. And it wasn't the first place we started when we did this series, because these are all Hebrew-based names. Like, everything that we're doing begins with the Hebrew word. And I didn't want to make the jump immediately and say, okay, well, if we're talking about happiness and blessedness, then we have to talk about blessedness and happiness in Matthew, because Matthew would use a different word. In Matthew, we're using Greek words to say, oh, that's the word that they're using that means happiness, not Asher. So I couldn't make that just immediate logical jump without digging into it, without doing the due diligence of saying, what is the word that when Jesus says, blessed are the, what is that word that says blessed? You want to know what it is? It's makarios. The Greek word being used is makarios. Now, what does makarios mean? Well, it is often used in the New Testament. It's used many, many times in the New Testament. And it can go kind of two different ways in the way that you pull out the interpretation to it. But both of them are related. It can either be used to refer to having God's favor, which would be being blessed, or it can refer to the feeling you have from having God's favor, which would be happy. So I think, yeah, we can work with this. We are safe to proceed on that talking about Matthew 5 and the Beatitudes totally works and coincides with Asher and the happy, blessed feeling that we have from the Old Testament. I probably don't even have to finish the verses for you. I could just say the first part and you would get it. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the... Boom, right there. 10 points for that table. That's the only points in this game, so you guys win. Congratulations. We know it, we recite it, but what does it mean? We've defined the blessed part. We've talked for several weeks about that part. What is Jesus referring to with being poor in spirit? And what is the kingdom of heaven? Is it an invitation to possess property? Is this whole thing a confirmation of rewards for having no heart? Let's go through all of them, starting Matthew 5:3. Here we go. This is everything that's listed by Jesus in that section together. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the... No points that time. Just trying to keep you involved. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be... You catching on? Blessed are the meek, for they will... Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will... You got this. Blessed are the merciful, for they will... Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will... Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will... Now, I'm going to take it over from here because it'll get hard to say all these together. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. A lot of what we see here is kind of an embracing of humility. Being meek, being a peacemaker, being persecuted, those all stem from humility in one way or another. And as a result of these things, spiritual rewards follow. You have this follows into this if these things are in place. And essentially, those who have lowered themselves will be raised up in the view of God. If you wanted to kind of reduce down what's happening from the part A part to the part B part, those who have lowered themselves will be raised up in the view of God. And that jives with what James says, James 4:10, humble yourselves before the Lord, you know this one too, and he will lift you up. But is this a formula for instant results? Like where at the very moment your heart is pure, you're going to see God? Do you get the keys to heaven as soon as your spirit can be defined as poor? So Matthew is writing this from an eschatological standpoint. Eschatological. You know what that means? Well, I'm going to tell you. It's about end times, future judgment, final results. When you're talking about end times, when you're talking about eschatological things, you are saying this is going to be the reward. And like we had in verse 11, great is your reward in heaven. This is a future end times thing that he's talking about. It's meaning final judgment will determine these things. The rewards that are final rewards when all is said and done. The blessed part that's at the front of each phrase, though, is written in the present tense. Blessed are these things that are happening so that somewhere in future and end times, these things will be the result. Be happy about the fact that you are currently persecuted for following Jesus, because there is a big reward waiting for you in heaven. Present beginning, A part. Future end times, B part. And Matthew's version of this, his documentation of the teaching on what Jesus says here, is a matter that really comes across as a teaching on current emotional state. How is your attitude? How are you feeling right now as in your heart about these matters? And how will that translate into an amazing harvest in the future? He's focused on the non-literal side of it. And it's interesting if we read the other Gospels and the way that they interpret things, how you get a reflection of who that writer is. Like what does each of the Gospel writers bring to the table of how they feel and how they look at things? Because all four men who wrote about the life and teachings of Jesus in our Bible canon all had different occupations, different outlooks on life, different ways of interpreting situations. After the Beatitudes in chapter 5, Matthew goes on and introduces a lot of other concepts. It goes on for 5 more chapters of teaching of what Jesus has said and the statements he makes and the stance that he takes, and how they're all in that same field of receiving a future kingdom in heaven based on your internal attitudes. Matthew 5:21, for example, you have heard it was said to people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. Okay, don't murder. We know that from the law. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Like, it's not literally just the laws you break, it's the laws you break in your heart's intentions. None of the other Gospels share that kind of content the way Matthew does. Maybe it struck a nerve with Matthew where it didn't resonate with Mark or Luke or John. Matthew was a tax collector. He was the tax collector of the group. And the MO of tax collectors was to just arbitrarily at times just take money from the people that were coming past and decide for yourself what you might want to skim off the top and keep for yourself. And so it might have been fitting for him to latch onto these parts of Jesus' teaching where you're dealing with exponential results of a thing that you're taking in. That what it's going to look like for a person who is known for keeping internally to himself and then passing on to a larger group. Maybe this is something that resonates very well for Matthew, and that's why he generates this kind of wording and this kind of teaching for us. Thinking angry thoughts about someone is equal to murder. Looking at a woman lustfully is the same as adultery. And then also being poor in spirit leads to a kingdom inheritance. Internal leading to future things. And from Matthew's perspective, we are working toward an end result that is bigger than all of us. It was set in motion long before all of us, and it is all fulfilled according to a plan with Jesus at the heart. He did understand that there was a crowd that followed Jesus, and that crowd had desires. They wanted immediate satisfaction. Some of them in that mob mentality knew that he could heal. They knew that he could give them things. They wanted those things personally for themselves, individually, for immediate satisfaction. They had immediate needs. But Matthew liked to view it from a grander scale. He focused on sharing the account of Jesus from a kingdom perspective, the big picture. What are we internally working toward? How are we building How are we training our hearts? How are we training our minds to be strengthened and prepared for a proper time? A time that is coming, a time that is planned. And Matthew began his record of Jesus' teaching with those Beatitudes. He starts Jesus speaking. The red letters of Matthew begin in chapter 5 when Jesus sits down on that mountainside and starts telling his disciples, "Blessed are." But did you know that there's another gospel that talks about the Beatitudes? Did you? Did you know that the Beatitudes get mentioned somewhere else in one of the 4 gospels? It's not just the tax collector. The doctor writes about him too. Luke records sharing about people being blessed, though he doesn't cover all of the same ones and not exactly the same order and pattern, but it appears as though he is sharing his reception of the same teaching that Matthew relays in chapter 5. He records it slightly different, however. Let's look at Luke chapter 6. Looking at his disciples, there are other translations say looking up, as though he is sitting like a teacher would sit and teach a lesson. He said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you and insult you and reject your name as evil because of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, because great is your reward in heaven. For that is how their ancestors treated the prophets." You can tell there's parts of that are just reflecting the same thing, but can you spot the difference? Do you see the difference in that? Luke's account doesn't refer to the internal or the metaphysical state. Luke, who has a background as a physician, describes present physical conditions and results. Not poor in spirit, just straight out poor. Not hungry for righteousness, just plain hungry. In Luke's gospel, the needs are immediate physical needs, but with the same happiness that there will be with their fulfillment. So what's going on here? If these are truly both the same accounts of the same teaching at the same time, why are there differences? Was Luke's account from witnesses who were sitting farther away, so they didn't hear all the words to relay to Luke to have it all written down? Or was Matthew possibly trying to polish it up to make it more spiritually applicable? It's like if they were talking about a homeless crowd, if there's a homeless crowd in front of them, it's like Luke is saying, "We have tents for everybody that's homeless." And Matthew would be saying, "Home is where your heart is." So what's the difference? And how do we look at that in comparison together? Every year, from the weeks of camp that we do, which went, I don't know if I told you, they went great. We had the 2 different solid weeks, but there were multiple camps happening during those weeks. But every year during the week of camp, we always have a student on that first full day, wakes up in the morning on Monday morning, and they feel sick. Always. It's almost always around the same time in the morning, and it's almost always with a first-time student who's never been to a week of camp before, never been away, never slept in a dorm, all new people, they don't know any of them, and that student will complain about physical ailments, maybe a stomach cramp or a headache or something. And every week there is a nurse on staff, because you have to have a nurse on staff at camp, and they will go to the nurse and they will tell their problems to the nurse, and then after a little bit back and forth, they ask if they can call their parent. And as staff, and the nurse as well, we all know exactly what the kid is really, really suffering from, and I think all of you do as well. That child, and we can all diagnose it together, is homesick. They miss the comfort of home, and they're in a strange new place where they don't know anyone, and they immediately think they're going to have a horrible week. So in their mind, the best option is, let's be sick, let's call home, let's find comfort again. Our staff knows that big picture because we see it every year. We just know if they could just stick through this homesickness stuff, if they could hang around to the end, they will meet new friends, they will have a good time, and they will probably come back year after year after year. They've just got to get through that hump. They got to fight it, they got to stick it out and make it through. So we try to encourage them, why don't you just Make it to lunch, and we'll check back in and see how it's going. Let's give it a couple more hours, and I think you're going to be okay. I think it's going to be all right. But while they're sitting in that nurse's station on that first day with that immediate headache or stomach cramp, it's a tough sell. It's a very tough sell when they have not seen what we are trying to promise them is the future to happen. And the nurse, even though she knows it too, she knows full well it's homesickness. We've been through this before. She still has to do her job as a nurse. If someone says they have physical ailments, she has to do her due diligence. If the child really does have a legitimate stomach issue, she doesn't want to be the one that let it go and said, oh, it's homesickness, let's just let it be. It has to be addressed. So the parents are called, and often the student tries to convince the parent to come and get them. And we try to encourage them to wait it out just a little bit, see how it goes. And sometimes the student agrees, and then they get to ultimately have a great week. They can get to the future of it and see the end result and know it was great. And then sometimes they're insistent that they have to go, and they end up leaving because they're homesick. I think you could call that homesick word another one of those single compound oxymorons that we've talked about all this whole month. It's a word where, if you really do look at the two parts of it put together, it's not the thing that we're conveying it to be. You're not sick of home. It's not being at home and the air and the smell that makes you nauseous. You are wanting to go home because that's where the comfort is. Home is where your comfort is. So you're trying your best to ironically convince people that you are physically sick so that you can go to the place that you think won't make you sick. And we call that being homesick. When it comes down to it, it is a desire for comfort. Home is where comfort is. It's where the literal home, with all the amenities that you crave and the desires you have, like your own bed and Wi-Fi, all those things are comfortable. Or it's the non-literal form of home, where it's where your family is. It's where you're familiar with things, where the people are that make you feel safe. And I think if we're honest about it, we're all, be honest, a little homesick to some extent. We all have a desire, if we're going to call homesick being a desire to go to comfort, that home is where comfort is. We all have a desire to get back to a comfortable place, whether it is a literal home or people in our lives and how they make us feel, or sometimes we're homesick for the past. We're homesick for a better time or better situation where things felt happier. And we'd love it if we could just convince someone to let us make a phone call back to that comfort. But someone else out there knows the bigger story and knows that if you just hang on through the sickness, it's going to be awesome in the end. It's a blessing that you are hungry or poor or in mourning, because those are true, genuine points of humility that show that you are honest with yourself and you're opening yourself up to God, that you're exposing your weaknesses and your emotions truly to God. That is a blessing. Be happy because you are revealing to God who you are so that He can reward you for having real, true emotions and being honest about who you are. Matthew 11:28, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. That one, in two verses back to back, does the physical and the non-physical. It's metaphysical and literal in back-to-back verses. We have immediate comfort needs, and we have long-term spiritual comfort needs. Take your weaknesses, your brokenness, your tiredness, take it to Jesus, and He will give you rest. He will give you comfort, and in your present body or in your soul, you will find home. So are Luke and Matthew talking about the same thing? I want to bring that question back. We could spend another week making the arguments both ways on whether or not they are talking about the exact same Beatitudes spoken from the same hill on the same day. But I don't want to spend next week's bottle sermon talking about that. So there's too much. Let me sum up. Jesus traveled and Jesus taught. We know this. His ministry covered many towns and countrysides over the course of 3 years. And as a teacher, you are no doubt sharing the same messages and points in multiple locations because new people that are hearing it for the first time don't know what they haven't heard. You have to repeat some things. The premise of his teaching would need to be repeated because the audience would be new. Meanwhile, those closest to him who are following him from town to town would hear the lessons multiple times. That's why it sticks in their heads. That's why 60 years later they could still recite them, they could write them down, and we could have them today. It's how they learned to live because he taught them to multiple places. They continued on teaching when he took over. When they took over his ministry, they continued on teaching the things that he taught because they were his disciples to teach it. So the accounts from Matthew and Luke could be two of those times where the same premise is being taught, where one, he's showing you can get comfort from the literal, and the other, he's showing you can get comfort from the non-literal. They are not contradictory. Even if you were to say that they happen at the same time, it's the same one. The physician's record addresses literal needs and promises fulfilled, and the tax collector records and addresses internal needs. We've already shown that Jesus is willing to fulfill both. There were hungry people that were literally fed. There were broken people who were literally healed. But then there were also people who were struggling spiritually that were forgiven. No need is beyond the scope of finding comfort at Jesus, physical or otherwise. And they both ultimately point to the future. At the end of both of them, that last little section, both Matthew and Luke ended with the eschatological statement, "Great is your reward in heaven." Whether we're hungry for spiritual clarity or a cheeseburger, great is your reward in heaven. There will be a point in the future when we won't have hunger for either. We won't have any kind of hunger when we are in the presence of God. We won't have the need because in his presence there are no more needs. He is total fulfillment, total sustainment. And since we're saying great is your reward in heaven, let's end by reading scripture from a view in heaven, shall we? This is Revelation 7:15 through 17. Therefore, they are before the throne of God, and this is talking about the host of people in robes, and they're dipped in the blood and they're washed white. They are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. Never again will they hunger. Never again will they thirst of any kind. No kind at all. The sun will not beat down on them, nor any scorching heat. No need for that. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. He will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Amen.